Chances are you've probably heard something about Ecuador in the past couple days in the news. Nationwide protests have shut down the country, and characterizations like violent, chaos, and uprising are common in headlines of articles reporting back on the situation in the country. But what exactly is happening, and why is it that millions of people are on the street demanding current President Lenin Moreno's resignation and the repeal of Decree 883? Today, we look at a lesson in indigenous resistance and what Ecuador can teach Latin American and Caribbean and third world peoples about fighting back. On October 1st, President Lenin Moreno signed a deal with the International Monetary Fund to the tune of $4 billion. This deal came with several conditions, including repealing and reversing a subsidy that has been in place in the country for decades on oil. This subsidy, according to Moreno, cost the country $1.3 billion, and this is why it was necessary to eliminate. But what this means for everyday people is that the cost of living has immediately shot up. Diesel shot up to 119% increase, and gasoline to about 24%. And it also means that this has wider ramifications throughout the economy. It means consumer goods, food, transportation, health, everything that requires oil in its production, logistics, or distribution is immediately gonna go up. And this is why on October 3rd, transportation workers called for a national strike, which rolled into October 4th when indigenous leaders came together and called for a national march on Quito, the capital of the country. Indigenous folks arrived to Quito on October 8th, upon which Moreno declared a state of emergency, moved the capital, an unprecedented action in Ecuadorian history, from Quito, which is in the Andes in the mountains, to Guayaquil, which is on the coast, and is also widely considered the heart of finance capital in Ecuador, of the right wing, and of the oligarchy in the nation. So he was literally running from the people who were coming by the thousands and thousands of indigenous people and Afro-Ecuadoreans to the heart of the administration of the Moreno government, which was in Quito. So what has happened since then? A lot. 5 people are reported to be dead, including an indigenous leader, for which they held a memorial and vigil on October 10th. There's been widespread violations of human rights, including tear gas, rubber bullets, protesters being illegally and preemptively detained, legislators, and shutting down of public media outlets who are contradicting Moreno in the country. The country is currently in a state of emergency, and just today, October 12th, Moreno has declared a military curfew at 3 p.m. So no one is allowed to be out in Quito after 3 p.m., which is absolutely incredible how he does not think this is fascism. CONAI, which is also the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, and a leading force in the movement, has agreed to sit down with Moreno for negotiations. As of now, experts estimate that there's already been $1 billion lost in revenue for the country due to the strike. This is because Ecuador is an oil exporting country, and because everything has been shut down, that includes refineries and that includes oil fields. And Ecuador not producing oil really hurts its GDP because it's almost completely dependent on oil for most of its revenue. On top of that, the Ecuadorian people are calling and invoking on Article 130 of the Ecuadorian Constitution, which explicitly states the people are allowed to call for the removal via an election or the dissolving of the National Assembly of any sitting president in a situation of grave political and internal commotion. But Moreno continues to act as if this doesn't exist and is ignoring cries from the people to step down or to submit himself to another election so that the will of the people could be heard. This is why people have continued to be out in the street and have continued to call on Moreno to step down. Now, the consequences are widespread. This is for Moreno, merely a continuation of a lot of his policies. He campaigned in April 2007 when he was elected on a continuation of Rafael Correa's Revolución Ciudadana and their party, Alianza País, which was a continuation of progressive social, economic, and political reforms in the country that had been shocked many times by economic crises and banking factors in the 90s and the late 80s, including the feriado bancario, which led to a massive, the largest exodus of Ecuadorians in the country to the tune of about 1 million people who left the nation. In addition to this oil subsidy, something that hasn't been documented a lot in the news is the additional reforms that are demanded by the International Monetary Fund, which includes thousands of firings across the public sector, the slashing of protections for workers' rights, and reforming labor laws to increase the already precarious situation of the workforce in the country, the reduction of importation taxes, the elimination of advance payment on taxes for the wealthiest and largest corporations, and the continuation of previous neoliberal reforms that Moreno signed earlier in February of 2019, and the opening of Ecuador to the Trans-Pacific Alliance trade partnership, and the negotiation of free trade agreements, of which Correa, who was president from 2007 to 2017, promoted protectionist economic policies for the country to defend Ecuador from financial speculation and external investment that keeps many of our countries indebted and in a neo-colonial state to the US and imperial interests. And Ecuadorian people will continue to be out in the streets, and there's very little way that we see this stopping until Moreno steps down. Ecuadorian people have a long and valiant history of getting rid of presidents. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot that we can learn. In fact, most of the folks who were kicked out or forced to resign in those years were because indigenous folks called for a mass uprising and mobilization. On top of that, there's just so much that was gained and is now being lost because of Moreno. Social spending has been reduced, poverty has increased, inflation has increased, unemployment has increased, and all direct consequences of Moreno's neoliberal austerity plan. But the Ecuadorian people have been out en masse, they have been out in the streets, they continue to be out in the streets, they continue to be jailed for violating a ridiculous 3 p.m. fascist curfew. And we stand wholeheartedly with the Ecuadorian people and with their fight against neoliberalism, parasitic imperialism. Please follow us on Anticonquista. We're online at anticonquista.com. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.